social distancing at the chamber, a pre-holiday edition and maybe a pre-stimulus deal edition. Garrick Taylor is always joined by the boss man, the hammer, Glenn Hammer, the CEO of the Arizona Chamber. Glenn, welcome.
Good to do the show.
All right, 3 topics on the table. Before we hit the air, the Washington Post headline on its website, stimulus nears finalization. Glenn, you've been ranting and raving about this. You've wanted this deal for several weeks. Glad to get it done. We're this close. What do you think?
They'll get this done before Christmas. So we're in the last night of Hanukkah. It'll be post Hanukkah before Christmas. And the reason why is that we need one more bridge this year as the vaccine rollout continues. And 2 major points, and I'll get to a few others we could talk about that are important as well. But the big ticket items is that we've got 12 million Americans about who are going to lose all unemployment insurance the day after Christmas.
Yeah.
That would just be terrible for that to happen. And for those individuals, it's important to note the obvious. They lost their jobs for no fault of their own, a once in a century pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
We also have so many small businesses that are suffering. U.S. Chamber MetLife just released a survey a few days ago, and it's really sobering in terms of how many small businesses are still at risk of closure. And I believe about 75% feel additional federal help is necessary. So the second major component of that package needs to be probably $300 billion, $350 billion for another round, perhaps more targeted, perhaps for small businesses, but we need another Paycheck Protection Program round. Then some of the other elements that are likely to be in there, we need airline assistance. They've been hit harder than any other industry, probably something for restaurants, some dollars for our K through 12 and university system that have had to cope with the cost of the pandemic. Certainly our healthcare system, particularly now that we're going through a vaccine rollout, and some of the areas where there's not agreement, and those 2 big areas are state and local aid and something that we feel is extremely important, liability protection, which benefits every sector of the economy. Those may need to be put off until early 2021, and something that the president-elect Biden and his administration will need to deal with.
Glenn, Majority Leader McConnell apparently told a Republican caucus meeting that if the Senate fails to get a deal done, it will have real negative repercussions from an electoral standpoint. It's not lost on Mitch McConnell. There's an election being held in a matter of weeks on January the 5th. Do you believe him?
I do believe him, and Senator McConnell has been an outstanding majority leader, and I want him to remain as majority leader for many years to come, particularly with the House being under the control of Speaker Pelosi and the parties switching at the White House. It's important to have a check on the system, but I also believe that let's get beyond politics, please. You know, we have millions of Americans that are really suffering. And these Americans are Republicans, they're Democrats, they're independents, and it's a lot of families. And this isn't a game. I mean, we're going right into, so they weren't able to meet the Hanukkah deadline, all right? But we're going right into Christmas. And to think that 12 million Americans would lose unemployment insurance, all unemployment insurance, the day after Christmas. I'm Jewish, but that feels to me like a lump of coal.
Joe Manchin, senator from West Virginia, said he couldn't imagine any member of Congress, forget party, going home for the holiday break having not gotten a deal done.
They just can't go home. Don't go home. Don't go home. Finish it up. Do it in a targeted way. The original House offer at the beginning was insanely overpriced at $3.5 trillion. We still do have a national debt that we have to deal with. This isn't the type of thing you throw every policy that you've wanted to get in your entire life. This should be targeted. It should be focused. And Garrick, it's a lot of conservative Republicans, people, great senators like Tom Tillis was on a U.S. Chamber call today, and he said this: if you do this right, you do this type of package that's limited, this is going to be more than pay itself, compared to the damage that would happen if millions of Americans lose their unemployment insurance, the markets lose confidence in Congress. The economic carnage would be great, and they just need to get a deal done. They need to do their jobs, and I'm optimistic that they will. Not completely, because of
I've seen this movie before, Glenn.
I know you're going to say, I said this, that they're not going to, I did say they weren't going to go back August recess. They weren't going to break in August. However, the difference there, I believe, was there was still that patch with at least existing state unemployment insurance, including the additional pandemic unemployment insurance that affects a lot of independent contractors. So the difference here, Garrick, is that this would completely cut off the spigot of all assistance the day after Christmas. I mean, I just don't believe that that's possible.
Right. All right. That brings us to topic 2 then. Glenn, you used the phrase that this package is a bridge, and it's a bridge to what? Well, for a lot of people, it's getting a vaccine. We got word last week that the Pfizer vaccine has gotten the green light. Today, Moderna gets the green light. We're going to have a lot more life-saving vaccines circulating, even just a matter of days than we did just a few days ago. I mean, it's just dose after dose. It's now hitting the system of America's public health infrastructure as well as the economy. So Glenn, talk a little bit about Governor Ducey's press conference yesterday, rolling out this vaccine, and it's on the way to Arizona. It's only good news, isn't it?
It's really great news, and I felt that this was one of the governor's best press conferences. It was very direct in terms of the importance of the vaccine and the stakes in terms of making sure people get vaccinated. Right. This is the best shot we have to return to normal. I would argue it's our only shot. And here's the great news: 95% effectiveness with the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, mild side effects, and tens of millions, hundreds of millions of doses coming online in the United States and around the world in a very short period, in less than 1 year's time. This is a remarkable testament to human ingenuity, as well as to, I'm going to give the White House and President Trump a lot of credit, vision. A lot of people said, no way, you can't do a vaccine in under 2 years.
Sure.
You can't do a vaccine under 5 years, a lot of people said. Well, this really was warp speed, and my new line on this, it's like running the mile in 2 minutes. This is a really big human accomplishment.
Yeah, it's incredibly impressive. I just want to underscore something that you brought up on Twitter, amplifying a point that the governor made, which is when it's your turn to get your shot, please get your shot. As you said, Glenn, that's the only way we're going to get back to business.
It really is, Garrick. And, it's very important up until that point for the mitigation measures that we've all been talking about: socially distance, stay home when sick, wear a mask when you're around others, try to do more activity outdoors as opposed to indoors. All of those are going to remain very, very important, particularly as we continue into the holiday system.
That's right. All right, so I have to ask you, Glenn, maybe you're ghostwriting for the Republic these days, because in Wednesday's column by one of our favorites, Bob Robb, he writes the following. And Glenn, I swear that I have heard you say this. Maybe he says, quote, "Until vaccinations have reached critical mass, don't push people into doing anything that makes them uncomfortable. The evidence is that reopening schools would be relatively safe, but there should remain a remote option for teachers and students still queasy about it. Same for office environments." Next paragraph, finally, don't do anything stupid. That's basically the hammer rule right there. Let's be careful. We're close. Let's get vaccinations to get to critical mass. And until then, let's keep doing what we're doing.
Well, I always enjoy reading Bob Robb, and he's right. And to me, Governor Ducey has handled this well. And I thought at yesterday's press conference, he made a great line. My wife asked me about what he meant about this. That if anyone was pitching a shutout,
Right.
he would take it.
Sure.
No one's pitching a shutout
Right.
in the United States, and the reason why is Americans we're social. We love freedom. We love being with each other, and this virus thrives on that. Today's Wall Street Journal, big story on California. Some rebellions going on there because of some of the restrictions. So, I believe we do have mitigation measures in place in terms of crowding. As the governor said, basically, if you're anywhere in commerce or in schools, you need to wear a mask at this point. Yeah. But I believe going beyond that at this point is counterproductive, particularly when I think it was a New York study actually that most of the transmission right now is occurring because people are going into each other's homes.
Right.
And I don't see any sort of appetite in Arizona or any other state for the police to go door to door to break up gatherings. That's just not going to happen. So use common sense and love and respect your neighbors and family.
That's right. It's just like you said, that on the financial side, Congress can create a financial bridge to get us to a point where, as Rob says, the vaccine reaches critical mass in terms of human behavior. Let's stick to some common sense mitigation measures. We don't have to go into full lockdown mode if we're smart about it. So there's light at the end of the tunnel.
And one of the things that I hope that the Arizona Department of Health tracks, if they're able to do so, is the number of Arizonans on a daily basis, if possible, getting the vaccine. Because every Arizonan getting a vaccine, it's not 1,000% established, but you're probably not only saving the possibility that they'll get sick, but they're probably not going to be a vector to spread the virus. So to me, that's going to be important. So people see the progress that every day we should have some people taken out of the game in terms of being able to spread this terrible and sometimes deadly bug.
All right, and finally, topic 3. You delivered some testimony today at the State Senate in the Finance Committee. We were just talking about a pandemic that was unleashed on us through no fault of our own. A couple of these things, we've stubbed our toes with our eyes wide open. JLBC presented their findings of the financial impacts of Proposition 207, which legalizes recreational marijuana, and Proposition 208, which increases our top income tax bracket by nearly 78%. You were on hand along with economist Steve Moore to give some insight from the business community. Why don't you tell us what you had to say to the committee members?
Well, I appreciate the chairman, J.D. Mesnard, and the incoming chair, David Livingston, being part of this important hearing. So it's really what could be the economic impacts of 208. And Steve Moore, who's one of the world's great economists, did a study for us with Dr. Laffer. Yeah, the Laffer of the Laffer napkin. And their study found that we could lose 200,000 or so jobs over a 10-year period. In context, we lost about 120,000 jobs at the height of the Great Recession. Right now, from the pandemic, we're still down over 100,000 jobs. So that's a lot of jobs. Another study by Jim Rounds and Goldwater Institute put the impact at losing 120,000 or so jobs and 2.4 billion over 10 years, split among state and local taxing authorities in terms of the revenue hit outside of the amount that would be raised by the surcharge. So the message we wanted to deliver is this proposition that narrowly passed. This is going to have real economic consequences. Mm-hmm. When you jack up your top marginal tax rate 78%, you almost double it overnight. You've got to be concerned that the fewer than 1,000 people that are identified by JLBC, Joint Legislative Budget Committee, mm-hmm. of paying 41% of this tax, you've got to be concerned that a number of these people are going to leave. They're going to take their businesses with them. And with that, we're not only losing the revenue that could be raised from the surcharge, but we would be losing the regular income tax revenue that they pay, which, by the way, is probably over 30%. So whether it's Medicaid, community colleges, universities, and education, and child care, child services, all of those things, those could be negatively impacted. So this is really serious stuff. And I was glad that the committee held this hearing.
Glenn, one of the things that we learned in the run-up to the testimony by you and Steve Moore, we heard from staff that if you're looking for reliable, predictable, steady revenue streams, you probably don't want to look at these particular tax filers in this upper echelon. There's a lot of small businesses in there. And as we learned in the recession 10 years ago, these revenues, Glenn, they fluctuate, and they fluctuate wildly.
Well, as Steve Moore said, and it looks like Arizona over the last few years has really seen a very strong increase in income tax collections. Well, what happened a few years ago? The federal government, through the leadership of the president and the Republican Congress, passed the the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. That capped the deductibility of state taxation. So that made it even stronger pull to leave high tax states and go to lower tax states.
Right.
And when you take a look at the migration to Arizona and Florida, North Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, it appears that's exactly what's happened. Now, the sad thing is we've lost much of that advantage overnight. And then you add into the fact we're doing the show over Zoom, we're in a pandemic. So you have basically a lot of companies and successful entrepreneurs thinking, where do I want to live? Because I can do what I'm doing anywhere. Well, if anything, you would think that that would accelerate the trend from high tax to low tax states. And, states, now I want to also just take a quick detour. Arizona has a phenomenal tax structure when it comes to corporations, one of the best. If you're manufacturing, you're paying little corporate income tax, you're paying much lower property taxes. It's a great deal. And Arizona is one because we're getting all those personal income tax, the sales tax, the property taxes. No one's complaining when all these major companies build up here. But who runs and works at companies? People.
Yeah.
So you have this from the Wall Street Journal today, and I'll read it. Texas's tax advantages is all about individuals, not business taxes. So if we don't think it makes a difference what our personal income taxes are, we're making a mistake. So we've got an issue here, and we're really going to have our work cut out for us. Look, people are going to continue to move to Arizona, but we may be losing a number of high earners who have very successful businesses, and it's going to be very difficult to replace the jobs that they bring, as well as the tax revenue that they generate.
Glenn, before we let you go, you delivered this testimony, but you acknowledged that you were providing testimony today on something that's already law. It's not theoretical. Are you just one of these tax cranks who's just prattling on, or do you think there's room for reform, or is that what you're trying to do, is get lawmakers to look at areas where we ought to reform?
I want everyone to look at this objectively. As I said during the testimony, first time in my 14 years at the chamber, I've had to field calls about companies leaving the state because of our tax policies. I don't have a playbook for that. This is a clear and present danger to the continued success of Arizona's entrepreneurial and technology economy. And I want to go on record and explain this. Now, there's a lawsuit or lawsuits filed, so we'll see what happens in the courts.
Sure.
But regardless, Garrick, I believe it's very important for us to take a complete look at our tax policy in particular. We've done some important tax reforms like the conformity bill over the last several years, but it's fair to say there hasn't been a complete look at our entire tax system in 10 or so years. So this would be a good time to really take a look, see the types of things we can do to increase our attractiveness, which again, when we do so and we're generating these jobs and these humans coming to our state, it means more tax revenue. And that's good for our continued desire to see more funds into our K through 12 system, our community college system, and our university system.
Yep. As always, it's the fastest 15 minutes in sports. Thanks for the rundown. Viewers, we think in another 48 hours, we're going to have a stimulus deal, but if we don't, send your complaints to Glenn. All right. Thanks, Glenn. We'll catch you on the next one.
All right. Thanks, Garrick.